want to welcome Vic Williams to the podcast. A little bit of background on Vic. He's a ADHD and dyslexia sufferer himself. He feels the pain. He owns the Strategic Edge, a community powering the next generation of neurodiverse founders. He turns their unique wiring into their competitive edge by refreshing habits and rebuilding flow. Vic, you and I have known each other for a couple of years, and I can tell you that's the truth because you've helped one of my family members. So welcome to the call.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it. Hello, Jesse. Good to meet you.
Great to meet you, Vic. Thanks for being with us.
Awesome, man. Love it.
Vic, today we're going to jump straight into menopause, ADHD, and menopause doesn't cause ADHD. We know that. It seems to expose ADHD.
Yeah.
When hormones crash, dopamine tanks, and every coping system collapses. Can you explain this to us better? What happens around menopause? Because so many women we're hearing all the time are discovering their ADHD.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things, Lawrence, and I was actually speaking to someone this week about it, and they were saying, we see this incredible rise in the number of people that are being diagnosed, especially women right now with ADHD. And if you look at it, it's really interesting. A lot of people are being diagnosed with ADHD right now because it's becoming more acceptable to be diagnosed. The thing I've noticed, and I don't have any real statistics on it, but it's just something I've noticed from my clients and the environment I'm in, is that it seems like the more people or the greater percentage of people that are being diagnosed right now with ADHD are in that perimenopausal, menopausal phase. And it's like they're suddenly realizing, hang on, wait a minute, I've got this issue going on, the thing around menopause. Why are all these things being exacerbated? And then they finding out about ADHD and the knock-on implications for that. And there are so many reasons why these two are sort of so engaged with each other and creating so many additional challenges that, for example, I as a bloke who's ADHD and dyslexic, I don't have to deal with, but I see in a lot of my clients. And so there's it's such a complex issue. For example, it's got to do with dopamine and with estrogen drop off, which is estrogen is a dopamine modulator. Okay. As that drops off, the whole dopamine system goes into kind of like a chaotic environment. There's the issues around how estrogen drop-off is implicated with cortisol and the impacts that cortisol has on the rise in anxiety and the challenges with sleep and all those things that women who are dealing with menopause have to deal with. I mean, it's just, for example, one of the things that I've come across now. Obviously, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a scientist, any of those sort of things. I'm just a bloke with a real interest in ADHD and dyslexia and a bloke who's got a serious interest in research. Somebody tells me something, man, I can go down a rabbit hole so quickly and find out absolutely everything or absolutely nothing about the whole thing. But one of the things that I've discovered is that inflammation in the body is a huge issue for a lot of people because of the diets they have and the stuff they drink and the stuff they eat and all that sort of stuff. But inflammation for a woman who's going through menopause is elevated. Okay. I've been married for 32 years. My wife's gone through menopause or still going through menopause. So I see these things. Okay. And a lot of guys, obviously, we're a bunch of blokes talking about a condition that affects women, but it affects us too. And our understanding of that condition can help our wives, our spouses, our partners, whatever, to deal with those things. And so one of the things is inflammation. As estrogen drops off, so the levels of inflammation seem to increase. But when those levels of inflammation increase, there's a number of impacts it has. So one of them could be, for example, immune system response. As that inflammation grows, there's an immune system response. Okay. Now, that's not got anything particularly or directly to do with ADHD. However, the brain may see that as what we would call it, an attack on the body. Okay, so it's something it's got to defend against, which means that the stress levels in your brain or your body rise. So as the inflammation rises, stress rises because the pituitary gland is telling the adrenal glands to release cortisol. So your stress level rises. And they kind of fighting against each other, one going up, this one going up, this one going up. Then the brain goes, hang on, I've got too much cortisol in here. And it then tells the pituitary gland and the adrenal gland to stop producing cortisol. But your body's still feeling the effects of all that cortisol in it. And so sleepless nights, anxiety rises, all these different things. So it's a hugely, hugely complex thing. Sadly, there's too little currently research being done into the implications or the knock-on effects of ADHD on menopause and all the things that come from it. The research isn't as big as it could be. It's probably something that there's a lot of people researching at the moment. For example, the other thing that I've come across is the impact of nutritional supplements that women may take or to help them with menopause. Okay. For example, they may take a calcium, magnesium nutritional supplement that is fortified with vitamin D. Okay. But if they ADHD and they are taking some kind of stimulant drug to reduce the effects of ADHD, they'll actually be reducing the effect of the drug by taking that calcium-magnesium combination because of the absorption rates that the drug needs, but the calcium-magnesium reduces. So it's that awareness of, oh dear, I'm taking this and I'm taking that. Which one do I stop? Because both are going to be hugely impactful for women that are ADHD and going through menopause, but they can counteract each other. So, for example, if somebody is ADHD, they struggle with sleep naturally. If they're in menopause, they struggle with sleep. But if they take a calcium, magnesium nutritional supplement that's fortified with vitamin D, it will help them with their sleep pattern. It'll help them to sleep better, more regulated. But as I say, if they're also taking that stimulant drug, they're not going to get the benefit of either. So it's kind of working those things out. Lawrence, very, very long answer to a very short question, but it's a really interesting environment to look at stuff that is happening. So inflammation, go back to that. One of the impacts of inflammation is chronic diseases. It can relate to things like arthritis, for example, and people who are ADHD may be more susceptible to arthritis or heart conditions. So having menopause, increase in inflammation, having ADHD, already at risk of dementia, heart disease, those sort of things. Now you've put the menopause and the ADHD together, and that is again elevated. So there's so much to look into, to talk about, to understand, particularly from our perspective as blokes, as to how we can support our partners and spouses.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what's needed, Vic. I think maybe we need to go to a bit of man speak here and explain to the blokes that, if the day that a woman starts to go through her change and her body's being ripped, the estrogen's being ripped away from her body.
Yeah,
Estrogen is
yeah,
impacting every cell in that woman's body. And for a brain, it literally is the fuel that fires the brain.
yeah,
So the brain starts to
yeah,
slow
absolutely.
down. There's brain fog, there's
Hmm.
confusion, there's
Yeah,
tiredness, there's
yeah,
concentration, there's not understanding why she's changing, she's irritable. There's so many factors around the stripping out of that estrogen.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And all those things are exacerbated by ADHD. You're talking about tiredness. One of the things that people with ADHD really struggle with is tiredness, because our brains are functioning at such an elevated rate. So, Jesse, I don't know how much you know about dyslexia and ADHD, or particularly ADHD, as we're talking about now. But if you think of somebody with ADHD sitting in a cinema or a movie house, and on the wall in front of them is 1,000 TV screens. Okay, and each of those TV screens is running a different movie. Okay, you are, as the ADHD person, sitting in a seat, looking in that cinema, looking at all those screens, trying to decide which one you want to focus on, which one you want to watch. So ADHD has got a slight misnaming. It's not necessarily an attention deficit. It's generally an attention overwhelm. Okay, there's too much that your brain's absorbing, too much that your brain is dealing with, and as a result, you struggle with making decisions. So your brain is running at a huge level. Now you're sitting looking at those 1,000 screens trying to make that decision, and the minute you make the decision, that's the one I'm going to focus on, all the TV screens change and play a different movie. And so that's the speed at which our brains operate. It's hugely taxing. It uses a huge amount of our body's energy to maintain that level of activity. Now you think, okay, so somebody's dealing with menopause, they're already tired. Now their brain's in overload, estrogen has been stripped out, dopamine is an issue, so motivation, all those sort of things. And now they're dealing with that part of ADHD where the exhaustion comes in. So tiredness from menopause, exhaustion from ADHD. When those two clash, you've got depression, you've got that sense of I'm not worth it, I'm useless, I'm rubbish, I can't do anything. Stress
Impending
rises,
doom.
cortisol
Yeah.
gets injected, and it's just it's like tumbleweed. It just keeps on rolling.
Vic,
So
can
yeah,
you? That's I'm taking a bunch of notes for myself here, Vic, because I'm learning a ton as you're talking. And one of the things that I was hoping, and you've been hitting on it, but can we just focus purely on stress for a minute and
sure.
understanding the impact of cortisol on stress, but really from the standpoint of, because that's something that Lawrence and I talk a lot about. We know that when estrogen drops, cortisol rises. We know that this can happen at night as well. But when it comes to ADHD, generally speaking, how does an a neurodiverse person with ADHD, how do they handle stress differently than somebody
Yeah.
else?
Well, a very short answer. People with ADHD handle stress very badly, generally. So cortisol is not just a stress hormone. Okay, cortisol is actually a hormone that also tells your body when it's starting what's called the sleep-wake cycle. Okay, so that's when your body's at its coldest temperature at night. You've slept, your body gets to its coldest temperature. At that point, the brain releases a small amount of cortisol, which tells your body it's now time to start waking up. And you start what's called the circadian rhythm, the 24-hour cycle that we all go through. So it releases a little bit of cortisol, so you start waking up. So it's not just a stress hormone, it's a hormone that starts that cycle. The problem, though, comes with people that are ADHD, because the brain is moving at such a pace. Stress will rise quite precipitously, but where the complication comes in is the effects of the stress. So I'm looking at these, go back to my 1,000 screen. I don't know what to focus on. Because I don't know what to focus on, I've got this huge amount of overwhelm. My anxiety rises, my stress rises. Now I make a decision and I decide, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on. This is what I'm going to do, and this is how I want to do it. Now I sit with the problem of actually doing it. So I'm already stressed because of all the stuff going on. I make a decision, I'm going to do this, but then I don't do it. Again, stress rises. I climb into bed tonight. I'm trying to sleep, and I keep on thinking of all those things I haven't done. My stress rises because now I feel bad about myself. That has the knock-on implication of I'm so bad, I get nothing done, I'm useless, I can't accomplish anything, everybody looks at me badly. Stress rises again. And the implication again there is that the constant release of cortisol, we just become overwhelmed with cortisol, and we've got too much of it floating around in our bodies, which affects our sleep even worse. And so we're not sleeping well initially. This cortisol release, this stress release, is causing a bigger impact on our ability to sleep and to rest, which is raising it again. So one of the things that I try to encourage people to do to reduce their stress levels is exercise. So exercise as much as you can. 45 minutes a day, that's great. Get up and move. So you're sitting at your desk, you're stressing about all these things, you're not getting stuff done. Well, get a stand-up, sit-down desk. Stand up and move your legs around. That will reduce the stress. Then you can think clearer. So it's not knowing how to deal with stress keeps it rising, keeps that cortisol coming in. But just small little things that people can do that they don't know about or don't think about can help them reduce that. The flip side of that is you'll find a lot of people in the military that are in combat kind of roles are ADHD, and their release of cortisol causing stress in a combat environment is beneficial to them, and that allows them to cope with their stressful situation. It's beneficial in that space. So it's a very complex question to which there's no real simplistic answer.
Sure. And I think also with women losing progesterone, something that I've been learning a little bit about is, I think when you start to learn about menopause, the first thing that you're going to find everywhere is estrogen and estrogen depletion and the effects of that. But then as you learn a little bit more, then you start to understand the impacts of testosterone and combined with estrogen and the loss of libido and those types of things. But then actually, as I started to learn a little bit more, progesterone showed up. And I was like, what's going on with progesterone, right? And I started to understand the impact of it with ovulation and with pregnancy. And then I started to understand the impact of it in some other areas. But then one of the things that I thought was really interesting was when I stumbled across the fact that progesterone is considered the calming hormone for women.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The stress response. And this is where we know estrogen affects the areas of the brain that regulate mood, and we understand that there's those impacts. But one of the things that I started to understand as well that women are losing is the hormone that was allowing them to sort of handle a stressful situation and maybe come up with a logical conclusion as to what to do or say. And when they start to lose that, men, right, are often reporting like, my wife's got a hair trigger. She snaps at the littlest things, right? And I started to understand that maybe that's actually more about progesterone then it,
Yeah.
and it's sort of a
Yeah.
chaotic combination of all of these things. But for a woman with ADHD, dealing with everything that you've just explained, and not just losing estrogen and the effect that would have to help balance this all out, but she's also losing this other hormone. It just seems to make it all sound even worse.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, Jesse. I haven't looked that much into the progesterone side of it, but that's probably going to be my next thing to look into. But it's a combination of all these things that has that that compounding effect on mood and libido and thought processes and tiredness, all those things, a combination of all of them. And I think, for one, I never really thought of menopause from the sense of ADHD for most of the time that I've been married and my wife was going through menopause, because she's not ADHD. But then when I started to think about, okay, all my clients are dyslexic or ADHD or have autism, how does ADHD then affect these things? When I started to look into that, it's just like mind-blowing as to this compounding effect of all these things. Excuse me. And for us as blokes, not understanding that, my wife's got a hair trigger, I say something that's arbitrary and she blows a fuse. And I'm like, what was that all about?
Mm-hmm.
But now I understand, okay, so it's probably some of the impacts of menopause. She's also ADHD. Oh, hell. And then you put those two together. Now you understand it's not a hair trigger on a sniper rifle. It's a hair trigger on a freaking machine gun, and it's, how do we as guys help her to mitigate those things? And I think that's probably.
I can just jump in. Vic, if I can jump in there, and I'll tell you why. I want to take you down a slightly different rabbit hole. And, half the workforce in the UK, probably just like America, is female. And, when you start looking at some of the stats, a woman's brain can lose up to 11% of its grey matter as a woman starts to lose her estrogen. And they say, based on Dr. Lisa Mosconi's PET imaging studies, it shows up to 30% brain energy loss. Now you start looking at it from a work point of view, or possibly from being self-employed. If you've got an employee that's losing 30% of their energy loss within their brain, that's affecting every single function within their body. Surely workforces, employers should be looking at this really seriously. No more scented candles, guys. Let's start taking some serious action here. Let's start looking at this with empathy. Let's start creating awareness. Let's start looking at how we can help these women within the workplace.
Yeah, 100%. I can't agree with you more, Lawrence. I know there are a number of companies that are already doing it, where they've set up. I was talking, for example, to a college up in the Midlands this last week, and they were saying they've set up this a group to which everybody that all the women that are going through menopause and any of the guys that want information can become part of. And it was great for a while, but what she was saying to me is it's now become a shop for complaining. My wife's got menopause. What the hell can I do about it? My wife's emotions are all over the place. And it's become a moaning shop rather than a learning experience. And I think it's very true what you say, is that companies need to develop a focus on supporting their staff in not just the neurodiverse space, but the neurodiverse space that's impacted by menopause, but not in a way that's I think one of the biggest problems when companies put support structures in place, it's a tick box exercise. Yeah, we've done this, we've got this in place, and if you need it, use it. And we're not going to talk about it anymore because we've ticked the box. I think it's got to be more of an engagement piece, an interactive piece where, one of the things that I do is I go into companies and I educate them, the whole company, about dyslexia and ADHD and autism and the impact it has in the work environment. But I'm not just talking to people who are dyslexic, ADHD, or autistic. I'm talking to everybody, from the CEO down to the cleaner, so that everybody understands what it is, what the impact is, and what can be done to mitigate those factors. And I think what we need to encourage companies to do right now is go, okay, it's not just neurodiversity. We need to have somebody come in and explain to us what neurodiversity is, all these different conditions, explain to us what menopause is and all the conditions that are affected with that, and what the knock-on effect of these two things are on each other. But not just to a select group of people, to everybody, so that everybody's on the same page, understands the same thing, and they all can respond in a very similar way, in an educated way, in a way that actually makes change. Because, I was talking to a lady recently, and she was saying she had to take a bit of time off work because of the impact of her menopause on her workspace. She wasn't able to think properly. She was getting to work late, yada, yada, yada. And she took time out just to kind of get herself back together. And she said going back to work was something she was hoping and looking forward to. But she found that she was anxious going back to work because the majority of people didn't really understand why she had to take time off, what the things were that were happening to her, and how they could support her in the workplace. They knew that, this whole menopause thing, and particularly the guys, like, she's, you know what guys are like when they talk about those sort of things. It's just, it's tough. Okay. So she went back to work with this hugely elevated level of anxiety. And within 2 weeks, she was booked off with stress because nobody in the workplace was that educated around what she was dealing with. A lot of the women had empathy, but they were kind of like, you need to just pull yourself towards yourself, because they didn't understand that connection between menopause and ADHD. And so I totally agree with you, Lawrence. We need to get companies to fully understand. I came across a company in the US, Jesse. If I'm not mistaken, they were in Chicago. I may be wrong, but I think they were in Chicago. Okay. And they, it was an automotive company. They got a lot of dealerships, but their head office, I think, was in Chicago. Anyway, they put in a process around ADHD, dyslexia, autism, but also with the menopause thing. And they had, I did a talk for them via Zoom, just explain to them what those conditions are and what that impact is. And the feedback I got from that was that so many of the guys, including the CEO, I mean, he was completely oblivious. But the feedback that they came was these guys are suddenly realizing what they need to change so that they can properly support their teams. The people that they manage, the people that they engage with. So, yeah, I totally agree with you, Lawrence. Sorry, a very long answer to a short statement.
If I could jump in again there's something also, I mean, you just mentioned a motor dealer and how they can support their teams. But it's more than that, because some of their customers have got ADHD. And the way a customer
100%.
reacts to an advert who has got ADHD could be slightly different to the way a customer reacts who doesn't have ADHD or dyslexia. So,
Absolutely.
I think there's pros and cons to all of this, like everything in life. And I think ADHD and having diverse, neurodiverse people within your organization allows you to think about problems and issues and chaos and everything in a completely different manner.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. I think what is important is in those let me dial that back. That understanding of what those conditions are, what the symptoms of those conditions are, what the impact of those conditions are on a person, can really help a company be more customer focused. So again, I'll give you an example. One of the banks here in the UK, I had an interaction with them, and they sent me some documentation that is very difficult for me to read because of the font and the size. And so I got hold of their customer services department, and I said to them, look, this document you've sent me is very, very difficult for me to read. I'm dyslexic because of the font and the size. And the ton of lip that I got from the person on the phone. Well, it's not their fault, and it's not their responsibility. This is the document. I must just deal with it, and yada, yada, yada. I mean, that weren't the exact words, but that was the attitude. And I think we find the same thing with companies not understanding their client on the other side, who may be ADHD and menopausal. How that person responds to them, if they are educated, they may be able to go, oh, hang on, wait a minute. This person that I'm speaking to is dealing perhaps with these things. Let me redial my way of interacting with them. Calm the situation down, just speak slower, speak with more intention, ask less questions, give more explanation, go into greater detail, maybe solve the problem over 2 or 3 conversations. Because if you, for example, if you've got somebody who's ADHD and they've got a complaint, their stress level's quite high, same as somebody with menopause, their stress level's quite high, they're anxious, they want to fight, okay? And you as a customer service person on the phone, if you just start speaking slower, it'll calm them down. And so that understanding of what these conditions are and what you can do to mitigate, you can be educating your clients as to the condition they may or may not have, but the way in which you deal with it. It just educates them a little bit further, and it shows care.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
I think that makes I interrupted you.
That's very true.
No. I think that makes a lot of sense from the standpoint also of what can sometimes be a pretty triggering phrase, or it's not really a phrase, but more of a term, but mental load. And mental load for women is something, mental load for moms, mental load for women even before menopause, right? Or before perimenopause. It's a thing that I think men don't understand and appreciate. It comes from more than just the responsibilities, the tangible things that she does. It's something that men, I think it's actually what the men can't see. It's not what they see her doing. It's what they don't see.
What they don't see.
And I think that this idea of mental load comes into this conversation because it's actually what we're talking about from somebody with ADHD, somebody with menopause, a woman who is dealing with everything that you've explained. That in and of itself is mental load, right?
Absolutely.
It's just now that mental load of overwhelm and stress is that much higher.
Absolutely.
And I think, it's difficult. I've tried in some of my social channels and some of my posts to explain, right, mental load. I don't think that I think all I'm really getting is women saying, well, thank you for understanding. I'm glad one person gets it, right? But what I'm trying to do is obviously help husbands and men understand this. And I don't really know what it is about the term mental load that makes it almost off-putting or defensive for men, right? Because I think men come back and say, well, I have a lot of things too, right? I do a lot of things also. I do all of these things, so she should do all of those things. And anyway, I think that I just want to interject that term into this conversation,
Yeah.
because I do think that if you were to wrap everything up that you're explaining in a bow, mental load might be one of the ways in which you could do it. I'm curious, however, coming back to what you were saying that you do with companies, and what type of interaction? I mean, if you could get real specific to maybe like an actual call that you've had, what kind of interaction do you see between men and women? What is the difference in the response or in the acceptance? Do you feel that these conversations are uncomfortable, or do you feel like there's more of a relief, like thank you for helping us understand this? Does that change throughout the conversation? Because I think what you're trying to do, specifically around dyslexia and ADHD, even and then with a menopause piece as well, is what Lawrence and I are trying to do, right? And
Yeah.
we're also finding, when we talk to husbands, or when we hear from husbands, it's there's a lot of like defensiveness. There's a lot of sense of I don't need to deal with this. I didn't sign up for this. That sort of thing. What do
Yeah.
you see?
So I think, Jesse, you've picked on some really important things there. In that, again, an example, I was working with a client in London, a large financial service company. And the first talk I did with them was around dyslexia and ADHD directly, just specifically. And one of the comments that I heard, which was really quite shocking to hear, was actually came from the HR director. Okay, so in the room, in that first talk, were probably 65 to 70 of the top leadership of the company, all the directors and the very senior managers. And the HR director made a comment to somebody else that was sitting at the table. I don't think I was meant to hear the comment. I did hear it, and it shocked me. And I did address it later in the talk. But his comment was, my honest opinion is that this thing called ADHD and dyslexia are excuses for people who don't know how to work well. And it was shocking because this is an HR director who should understand what these things are. He followed that comment by saying, I will never employ somebody who can't read, write, or spell, i.e. dyslexic, or somebody who's hyperactive, i.e. somebody who's ADHD. And I addressed this later on in the conversation in my talk, because it was more of a workshop type of talk where I was there for 4 or 5 hours, and we broke into different groups and had conversations around tables. And I addressed it, and I said to them, so let's understand this from the perspective of you are ignorant and I'm educating you. And I saw a change in him over the period as we spoke about it. And I've seen the same happen where we talk about the impacts of things like menopause or ADHD on menopause. At the beginning, there's a lot of people that will go, oh, thank you. Somebody has finally spoken about this. But as you develop the concept, if you do it correctly, if you educate, so I work on a 3-step basis: educate, motivate, and empower. So the idea is you educate them first. What's the technicalities? How does the brain work? How does all the neurons work? What is the synaptic cleft? How does all the neurotransmitters work? Okay, so when we're talking about all those different things, and estrogen is in there. So we're talking about menopause, how they affect each other. Then we're talking about how do I motivate people to say, okay, this is who I am. How do I leverage that into the future? How do I make the best of that? Also, this is who I am. These are the things I struggle with, I can't do. How do I offset those? How do I outsource those? How do I give them to somebody else to do? And then empower them with this knowledge to be able to do what they need to do, having mitigated all those circumstances. So I find as we go through the process, you start in that place where people are going, some people are going, oh, thank you, finally somebody's talking about this. Other people are going, oh, my goodness, not again. Or oh, shut up, everybody's ADHD, or everybody's got a little bit of ADHD, everybody's got a little bit of this. So you find those kind of conversations happening. But as the process goes along, you see a lot more people going, oh, I didn't know that. Is that why that happens? Oh, now I understand why Jessie or Debbie or Claire sitting at reception freaks out when somebody doesn't close the door properly and she's getting a draft on her. Now I understand, because now they've got that education, they're going through the whole motivation piece. This is who she is, this is who I am, we can work this thing out. But then by the time you get to the end of it, if you've done it properly, you get to the stage where 90% or close to 90% as possible, people are going, okay, I've got some changes to make. I've got to change myself so that I can help that person. And you see it a lot in the blokes, particularly guys who are married, have got a long-term partner, and they getting to that 40, 45, 50-year-old mark. And you see, you almost see the lights come on. Oh, now I understand. Oh, now what can I do? How can I help them? And it's all that flip from it's all about me to, yes, it may be about me, but I need to make that about me about her so that I can help me too. It's kind of that, it goes from a transactional thing, it's all about me, to a real relational thing. And I think that's where a lot of the fall down comes. You get married and it's great, it's hunky-dory, everything's going along in the early stages, and then you start to understand this person. You start to, well, maybe not understand, you get to know them more. And I know for us blokes, having spoken to a lot of guys, they go, oh, hell, is that who I married? She does a lot of things that I didn't think she'd be able to do. And then as that time goes along, we compensate instead of understanding. One of the things around ADHD is masking. Okay. So we as people with ADHD, we mask a lot, we pretend we're something else, but inside it's absolutely killing us because we don't want people to know that our ADHD is that bad or it's affecting us that badly. Now, take that into a relationship. Women try to make fun of the fact that they're going through menopause. There's a lot of laughter. Guys point fingers at them. And you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so you've got ADHD, you've got menopause, you're going through these things. You're trying to hide your ADHD and you're trying to make fun of menopause. The knock-on effect of that into a relationship has got to be huge. It's massive. So how can I as a bloke go, hang on, wait a minute. My wife's going through this thing. My partner's going through this thing. She's got this issue she's dealing with. She may be ADHD as well. And she's got these conditions. How can I, as a man, go, right, I need to understand what these things are. I need to look at what I can do to help her alleviate those things. And so that it actually becomes part of the relationship and it becomes part of the fun of life rather than a mocking thing, a pointing fingers. I'll give you an example. I've got a very good friend, very, very highly educated lady. She's got a PhD, but she's also in that place now. She's got 3 kids, I think. She's just going into the menopause, okay? Into menopause. She's ADHD and she's autistic. So she's got a lot of different things going on. And up until she was married up until a year and a half ago. But her partner, her husband, never understood her conditions. those things that she's dealing with, ADHD and autism. And then when she had menopause, he was like, oh, I just can't deal with this. I don't know how to deal with you. I don't know how to calm you down, because he didn't take the time to actually understand. Because he didn't take the time to understand, they subsequently got divorced. She just had enough, walked out, took the kids, off she went. And that sadly is the consequence of so many guys not being educated. Now, if we can go into a company and we can educate the whole company, including the blokes, that can have the knock-on effect into their family. And so for me, it's not just educating the company or the individuals within that company, it's educating all the peripheral people, their parents, their children, their spouse, their friends, their family. And so that circle spreads because they now understand. Can you imagine? I mean, Lawrence and I talk about having a braai. You'd probably talk about having a barbecue, Jesse. So can you imagine a bunch of guys standing around a barbecue or a braai, flipping the meat, having a conversation, drinking a couple of beers, and somebody who's had this education in their company going, geez, guys, you can't believe what I've just, this week we've gone through this whole training, or we've done this whole session, and this guy was talking about menopause, a bloke talking about menopause, and I've learned this and this and this, and I've learned if I do X, Y, Z, I can help my wife. Jeez, imagine. Just think of the impact it could have on those guys standing around that fire having a beer, And if we can elevate that conversation to that level, bring in, oh, my wife's also ADHD. Yeah, okay. So I've learned all this stuff. So that for me, the education piece is not just the company. It's not just the individual in the company. It's the individual in the company who has people around them, who has a broader circle. And we can, it's like taking a pebble and throwing it into the dam, throw it into the dam, all those concentric circles. Man, if we can do that with this kind of subject into a company, happy days. But you asked engagement levels. The sessions I've done online, where it's like a seminar on Zoom, for example, the engagement levels from the men drop off very quickly. Very, very quickly. Because there's not that necessarily ability, or that level of ability to press their buttons. It's too easy for them to zone out. But I have found where it's the face-to-face group environment, the group dynamics tend to cause blokes to go, oh, hang on, I better listen to that because all these guys are. Whereas online, it's easy for them to switch off because they're not being impacted by the people around them. So I found the most impactful of those sort of sessions is the group dynamic. One-to-one, yeah, that works, but not hugely. It's the group dynamic, face-to-face, in-person. But, if not possible, if that one that group dynamic, face-to-face, in-person, whatever you want to call it, is not possible, then yeah, we can do something online. But no, I prefer not to. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're coming towards the end, and we're getting towards the end of this podcast. But something we really need to ask you is, if a woman discovers she has ADHD through the changes she's going through, what is realistically the chance that one of her kids is going to develop ADHD or has ADHD?
So ADHD primarily it's a neurocognitive condition that is primarily hereditary. Same as dyslexia, it's hereditary. So dyslexia, it's primarily got to do with the shape of three areas that are utilized by the brain for decoding certain things. With ADHD, it's the way, in a simplistic sense, to say the way the brain is wired. And that's mostly hereditary. You can acquire, and there's a lot of research around it, you can acquire ADHD through head trauma, mainly to the frontal lobe, through things like concussion injuries. you can develop ADHD. And you find that a lot in players who play like rugby or American football or soccer. But most people, the condition called ADHD is hereditary. So what we find a lot of is women take their kids to get diagnosed, or they go through a diagnosis process. And as they're going through that diagnosis, the parent is going, okay, that's me. Oh, that's me. Oh, yes, I've got that. Oh, yes, I do that. And the kid's going, yeah, Mom, you're also ADHD. So
Happened to me, Vic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it happened to me.
Yeah.
Took my son to a psychologist, went from a psychologist to the children doctor, whatever he was called. And he turned around to my wife and said, before I start answering the questions, let me ask your husband a question. Do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And my wife was sitting there going, you just described my husband. He went, it's hereditary. It's in the family.
Yeah. So it's kind of, there's no real hard and fast rule, but from the research I've done, the suggestion is the majority, probably 90% of ADHD is hereditary. The others is acquired ADHD, so head trauma, psychological trauma. It can bring those things on, but the vast majority is hereditary. And so you say, is the chance that my daughter's going to get it? Absolutely.
Wow, really interesting. Really interesting. Vic, this has been incredible. I have taken multiple pages of notes on my end. I have learned a ton, and I can't believe, just as we conclude this conversation, I think to myself, I can't believe how much I continue to learn about menopause, how much I've learned about menopause, something that I'm surrounded by it, right? There's a billion women going through menopause right now on the earth. I'm surrounded by this. I have no idea that it exists. And then as I learn about that, it just continues to stack and build. And then everything you just explained about ADHD and dyslexia, and then of course the impact that those things have on menopause is also so many things that I didn't understand. And I'm almost speechless by the amount of things that our fellow humans are going through, that are walking around us, or even in our families, or certainly around us at work, that so many of us don't understand. Absolutely. And it's just, and you don't need much, right? You don't need to read research papers. You don't have to read books. Think about what we've learned about this in just this call. Think about what you could learn about menopause from just watching one podcast. It doesn't take much. And I hope that people listening realize that just a little bit of this can change who you are as a person. It can change how you see others. It can change how you walk this earth. And I hope that people take some time to just, and if you've listened to this podcast, you've already taken the time. You now know what you can do to be different and to be better. And so I thank you, Vic, for being here. It's really been fantastic.